The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. In the graveyard summary. That night, Tom sneaks out of the house, got out of his bed, and went to the graveyard with Huck Finn. The boys walked to the graveyard and found the newest grave, which belonged to a man who was called Horace Williams. They hid themselves in a clump a few feet from the fresh grave of Horace Williams and waited for devils to appear. After a while, three figures approached the grave. At first, the boys thought that the voices belonged to demons, but soon they realized that the visitors were men. They turned out to be three adults who were grave robbers from the town, carrying out a midnight mission of their own. Tom and Huck were surprised to discover the young Dr. Robinson, accompanied by two local outcasts, the drunken Muff Potter and Injun Joe. Dr. Robinson ordered the other two men to dig up a grave and take out the body out of it for use in medical experiments. After they finished the job, Potter demanded extra payment for taking the dead body to Dr. Robinson's house, and Robinson refused, saying that he had already paid a fair price up front. In the argument that followed, Injun Joe reminded Robinson of an incident that happened 5 years earlier when Injun Joe came begging at the Robinsons' kitchen door and was turned away, and now intended to have his revenge for the insult that Dr. Robinson paid him 5 years ago. A fight began. Dr. Robinson knocked Injun Joe down and then was attacked by Potter. Dr. Robinson hit him, and Potter ran to Joe's defense. The doctor knocked Potter out unconscious, and Injun Joe stabbed Dr. Robinson with Potter's knife in the chest and placed the knife in the hand of the unconscious Muff Potter. The terrified boys, Tom and Huck, still unnoticed by the men, escaped from there without being detected by the men. Eventually, Potter awakened and asked Injun Joe as what had happened. When he looked at the knife and the dead doctor in shock, Injun Joe told the drunk Potter that he murdered Dr. Robinson in a drunken fury. Muff Potter's mind was so jumbled with alcohol and his head wound that Injun Joe had no trouble convincing him that he was the killer, and Potter, still dazed, believed him. Potter begged Injun Joe not to tell anyone, and Injun Joe promised him and said that he will keep the awful secret and not tell anyone about the crime, and they parted ways. Overcome by fear and grief, Potter ran away. When Potter was gone, Joe muttered to himself that Potter had left his knife behind. Joe knew that this will incriminate Potter, but that Potter will be too scared to come back for it alone. As far as Injun Joe is concerned, this was perfect. He slipped away into the night, convinced that he will get away with the crime he had committed. The boys watched in horror as Injun Joe murdered Dr. Robinson during the fight and blamed it on Muff Potter. Before Injun Joe left the graveyard, however, he noted smugly that Potter's knife remained near the corpse. The next day, the sheriff's men found the doctor's body in the graveyard, and Muff Potter's knife was also lying near his dead body, which Injun Joe had desperately left there so that it can be used as evidence against Muff Potter. That night, Muff came to the graveyard to get his knife, but the sheriff's men were there and they took Muff to St. Petersburg Little Jail. And there Muff sat for 4 weeks and waited for his trial. Poor Muff, who did not do anything, was ditched and trapped by his own friend, ended landing himself in jail without doing anything wrong or committing any crime. The boys were so scared that they ran away as fast as they could. Once they had settled down, they promised each other that they would never tell anyone about what they had seen in the graveyard.